The arrow is an insanely powerful element that we can use in YouTube thumbnails. They're actually more than just a way to draw attention. They can be used to send a message or to even guide the eye of the viewer. And therefore I've compiled a list of 8 of the most common ways that arrows are being used in thumbnails so that next time you use one, you use them with a purpose. Number 1, attention. While the first one is going to be a more straightforward way to use an arrow, it is still a good one. And that is the attention arrow. In this case, we simply pick a thumbnail and add a little arrow to it so that we can draw attention to something small, something hidden, or just because we have many subjects and we want the viewer to pay attention to one over the other. For example, in this case, we just have a normal thumbnail, add a little arrow to it, and bam, the viewer now knows where their eye should be looking at. Why is this so important? Because most viewers actually don't spend more than a few seconds looking at each thumbnail when they are trying to find a new video. So with putting an arrow on that thumbnail, you help the viewer with knowing where to focus. Now the redness of the arrow is just because red is really good at drawing attention. One important rule though is, if you have a thumbnail like a singular face, you don't have to add an arrow. People are already paying attention to this face, so adding an arrow on it is just going to distract away from this face. Number 2, progression. While a 2-panel layout where you have a before and after is a great way to show progress, to show growth, an arrow can also be used for the same type of thumbnail. Simply put one subject on one side, another on the other side, add a little arrow in the middle, and we're indicating that there's a relationship between these two subjects. Now, fun fact, you don't only have to use this for growth. We can use this leads to this transforms into this, but we can also do this for declines. So for example, you have a huge pile of money and now you have a very small pile of money. In this way, we show a decline. So here we can have positive progression, negative progression, or number 3, connection. Now why am I saying this? Because it's very similar to the 2-panel layout, but there's no progression in this one. It is simply an arrow to draw a connection. And this also doesn't have to be in this 2-panel layout. This can simply be you on the background, somebody in front of you, and now you draw an arrow to show, hey, there's a connection between these two. Another great example is we can take a big machine, take a little cog, right, place them next to each other. By drawing an arrow, we can also indicate where the cog belongs, right? And this is again a way to connect two subjects with each other. Number 4, context. Now sometimes an image doesn't tell everything, and text in thumbnails is often seen as a bad thing. But if we look into a A/B test, we can see that thumbnail text can actually do a lot of good things. For example, if we have a person with a rather neutral look, we can add a little arrow and add the word angry. Now we're actually adding an emotional state through a context arrow. We can also use this arrow in order to provide context about something. Let's say we see a party and we can assume it's a birthday party, but now if we change that word to gender reveal, suddenly we notice that the meaning starts to change. Sometimes we have this thumbnail where you get you and you're small, and then you're sitting on something big, for example, and you get this arrow that says me. And this just provides the context that that is you. Context arrows are great. They're fantastic to use, and they allow you to quickly grab attention and create an image and create some depth in your image. Fun fact, the common advice that text in thumbnails isn't good is not that good advice, because if we do A/B tests, we can often see that using text, simple text, readable text, can be a great way to draw attention. Number 5, motion. Motion is a great way to make an image feel like it comes alive. And the way that we do this is that we take an object that doesn't seem to be moving, such as a car, and we simply add an arrow on top of it, pointing left or pointing right. This indicates some motion that this car is in, and this could cause some really interesting thumbnail setups. For example, in front of this car is a wall, and without this arrow, nothing really seems to happen here. But add this arrow above the car pointing towards the wall, and it seems like this car is going to run into the wall. Now this is where you can start getting a little bit handy dandy, because you can use multiple motion arrows that conflict with each other, for example. So you can take one car and point left, another car and point right, and it seems like they're colliding against each other. You can also make them the other way around. So for example, you take 2 cars and you put a human in the middle. And this is going to sound so evil, but they have some rope, and you put one car the car is gonna go to the right and the other to the left, and now I feel like this human is gonna get stretched. Now I hope that the editor didn't create some vivid image, and editor, if you do, please make this YouTube friendly. Another one on this one is where we can kind of create some impossible direction. So for example, if we are going uphill with a motorbike and it seems like we're going uphill because we're pointing towards that, but instead the arrow points backwards, the assumed motion that the image says and the arrow conflict with each other, and this creates a little bit of intrigue. Number 6 is contrast. So this next one is really to highlight and add extra attention towards the difference in sizing of something. So for example, if you have a smaller person and a larger person, we can see the contrast, but the arrow could double down this contrast by adding it in the middle and indicating, oh, there's this height difference. Now often this does combine with a little bit of text, so because if you just add the arrow, then technically we could argue it's not needed, it's unessential. So we can have a double arrow where it points to both directions and add then the length difference between two people. Number 7, growth or decline. This one is typically when you work analytical or anything like that, but the housing market is crashing. So you have an arrow that starts to move downwards. Right. We also have an arrow that starts to move upwards. Whichever you use, it's a great way to indicate that there is a trend. This is very similar to motion. This is very similar to progress, but I give it its own category since it is so uniquely involved with specifically growth or decline. It can also just be an upwards or downwards arrow. So as you can see, there's already left, right, up, down. All of these directions have some meaning. If you want to show expansion, you could simply have a circle with arrows towards all sizes, outwards. This indicates suspension. It's a great other way to use arrows, but I have it as a bonus one because it kind of falls under a few of these. And number 8, process. This one, you've seen this before, it's a circle arrow, or you have an arrow, 4 arrows that seem to go in a circle, and this shows you're going from A to B to C to D, maybe even back to A. So sometimes you just want to show that there's steps to a certain process. And that's 8 ways that you can use an arrow in your thumbnails. Thanks for watching, make sure to subscribe if you want more.